In nature, this is especially demonstrable in both things like symbiotic and even parasitic relationships. If things get out of balance in those, if one member is too successful in their short-term goals, it can throw off the balance, and it can cause the elimination of both components. And this makes it demonstrable that in nature things do not always line up with our finite and weak perceptions that we have about things such as rights or justice, or even what does or doesn't constitute natural or balanced. If you've ever read the book Speaker for the Dead, it's a science fiction novel by Orson Scott Card. There's a good hypothetical instance in that book in which one perspective of what's equal and right would not fit in any way sustainable or realistic the realities of a system of life or being that's not completely understood by the observer. And as a side note, I would recommend reading the book after reading its predecessor, Ender's Game. They're good science fiction books, in my opinion. And for full disclosure, because people get kind of weird if I don't mention this, the series is authored by a man that's a member of my faith. He's Orson Scott Card. He mentions Utah like twice in the whole 4-book series, I think. And the only character I think in the whole book that's Mormon is his mother. Is the mother of the protagonist, Ender. And the protagonist, interestingly, throughout the book, is and remains a secular humanist. But to sum up my view as much as that is possible, and I do feel that society can or should dictate a person's to sum up my view as much as is possible, I do not feel that society can or should dictate a person's worth or estimation of humanity based on the traits they have. But I do believe that society has the right and responsibility to propagate mimetic elements and mimetic transmission setups that best overall ensure both its survival and welfare, and the welfare and promotion of those values it sees as right and true. I believe that if children have a right to feel secure and to be free to determine how they will pursue happiness. This doesn't always become a reality, and there are choices humans can make and things that can occur outside of anyone's control at present in which these rights are not achievable, yet I believe that they are still rights to be expected and fought for. And in that same strain, I believe that every child has a right to a mother and a father to which they are legally bound and from which they can expect sustainment and nurturing on all fundamental levels which they need. Again, certainly there will be times in which the extended family or even the community can and should be called upon to aid. But even though it can take a village, as you brought up, I do not believe that it's best or ideal or even sustainable to place the arbitrary desires for expanding perceptions of what does or doesn't constitute or consist of equality or rights to infringe upon those basic rights of children. Again, I know a lot of people like yourself that had less than ideal circumstances. There's instances certainly in which divorce is preferable to the continuation of certain relationships. But I don't believe that this means that we should hold those exceptions up as things that should be sought out or even generally desired. I don't know if I can alter your opinions on this matter at all. I personally know a good number of good individuals, of friends, of family members, many who have and many who act upon the same gender attraction. And I have nothing against them as people. I love them the same as anyone. I think in some instance, in some way, many men, at least I think to some degree I can relate as seeing as men and I think I'm included in this, can have tendencies, desires, to desire a variety of sexual partners. I think it's natural, but I do think it's wrong for me to, in this context, the context of the way things are now, to ever pursue that. And I guess that falls into one of those boxes you were mentioning. But you are correct that many people do fight this whole thing of being put in boxes. But often, as I perceive it, the survival and continuation of a person or being or species often demands that we consciously keep ourselves in boxes that we choose to put ourselves in, and not always because it's easy or because it aligns with all or even most of our natural inclinations, natural referring to desires, but we do it because we're driven by something that has to be sufficiently present in all lineages, in all continuations of life, in order for that to survive in perpetuity. And that's, the desire to do not simply what feels right, but what is as right as possible for continuation of both life and ideals. And a major component, continuing on, a major component of our agency, our free will, is our capacity to surrender it. And we can either knowingly and freely do it or unwittingly do it. And there's a claim in some of the comments in, I believe, your last video response, where one of the observers says that to strive for a utopia or ideal would be, quote, nothing less than a complete nullification of our species, unquote. And I don't see it, I can't see it that way. In fact, to me, in the realities of natural selection of the doctrines of his blind watchmaker, the only way to avoid a complete nullification of our species, a complete annihilation of our species, is to realize that there are better and worse manifestations of both relationships, of familial setups, and there's a spectrum in which there's a real gauge of relative fitness. There are arrangements and views we can take as a society that could decimate, mutate, or destroy us. The very core component of transmitting who we are lies in the familial settings that are the predominating norm in our society at any given moment. Our society rises and falls on the transmission or failure of transmission of those ideas, those memes that either enhance or hurt our movement into the future. And here's a final quote taken from the book Civilization on Trial by Arnold J. Toynbee, and it's presented at the front of this book, The Anti-Cradle. It goes, the things that make good headlines attract our attention because they're on the surface of the stream of life, and they distract our attention from the slower, impalpable, imponderable movements that work below the surface and penetrate to the depths. But of course, it is really these deeper, slower movements that, in the end, make history, and it is they that stand out huge in retrospect. When the sensational passing events have dwindled in perspective to their true proportions.